Hello and welcome back to another installation of Baking with Miss Piatt. I got a lot of requests for some very exciting baking projects to try out, like cakes and fancy cookies and stuff like that. And I hope this isn't too big of a disappointment, I decided to make something that was a little bit healthier because I need to be able to eat it at my house all the time and still feel good about making healthy choices. So today what I'm actually going to be making is oatmeal breakfast bars. I've made these before and they're very, very delicious and they're very healthy for you. So let's get started. Alright, so I've got my workspace organized. I also took a minute to preheat my oven to 375 degrees and I put some cooking spray into this baking pan. It's a square, which is 8 inches by 8 inches. So what would the total area of this square pan be? If you said 64 square inches, you'd be correct. 8 times 8 is 64 square inches. I'm going to set that to the side. Now for this recipe, what they have you do is first mix your dry ingredients in one bowl and then mix your wet ingredients in another bowl. So first what we're going to do is stir together our oats, and this is 2 cups of oats, our 1 cup of flour, and then I will need to measure out some cinnamon and baking powder and a little bit of salt. The salt needs really just a tiny bit, so I'll put that in. Okay. Now let me just double check how much cinnamon and baking powder I need. 2 teaspoons of cinnamon and 1 teaspoon of baking powder. Take the lid off of this. Grab my teaspoon from my measuring spoon set. Be careful that it's as close to exactly 1 teaspoon as possible. There's 1, there's 2. There's my cinnamon. It smells delicious. Now here's my baking powder. Again, baking powder helps make sure things bake correctly in the oven. I'm not totally sure how that happens, but you could probably ask my sister Sadie. She's a chemist, so she might know better than I would. There's actually a lot of science and chemistry involved in baking and cooking. I'm gonna put the cap back on my cinnamon. And now in this bowl, I have my dry ingredients of oats, flour, cinnamon, baking powder, and a little bit of salt. Next, in a separate bowl, I'm going to put together my milk, which is 1.5 cups of milk. This is oat milk, remember, so it looks kind of gray, but it's totally good. There's my milk. Next, I need to put in the applesauce. So here's 1/2 cup of applesauce. Remember, here's 1 whole cup, here's 1/2 cup. A 1/2 cup is exactly 1/2 of 1 whole cup. Putting that in there. Sounds a little gloppy. That's okay. This will make it nice and sweet and give some appley flavor, which is always delicious. Okay, next after my applesauce, I crack in my 1 egg. Again, kind of gloppy. Then I will put in my honey, 3 tablespoons of honey. I actually don't know if I have that much in this, but I'm just gonna use as much as I have. Next is my peanut butter, which is my favorite ingredient of all. And for the peanut butter, it's going to be 2 tablespoons. Now, this is gonna be a little complex. This is 1/2 of a tablespoon, So in order to make 2 whole tablespoons, I need 1/2, 2 halves, that's 1 whole, and another 1/2 and another 1/2, that's 1 whole. Altogether, 4 halves will make 2 whole tablespoons of peanut butter. Finally is the vanilla. For this, we need 1 teaspoon of vanilla. So I'll grab my teaspoon back wherever that went. Well, I'm having trouble finding my, oh, I found it. Baking is nothing if not a messy adventure sometimes. Perfect, I had pretty much exactly 1 tablespoon left. And it sounds like my oven is ready now. Great, there's my 1 tablespoon. Now all of my ingredients, except for the banana, which will come in a little bit later, are in their separate bowls for dry ingredients and wet ingredients. Now I'm gonna mix together my wet ingredients. Next, I'm going to combine the dry ingredients into the wet ingredients. So I'm going to take the contents of this bowl and dump it in with my wet mixture. Okay, now what I need to do next is actually go dice up, that means cut up into small pieces, this banana. And once I go do that, then I'm gonna be able to throw in my diced banana with this mixture of ingredients, and then it'll be ready to put into the pan and put into the oven. I'll be right back with some diced banana. Okay, so I'm back and I have diced up my banana. Here's my plate of diced banana. As you can see, the pieces are really small. That will help it get evenly spread throughout the mixture for the bars. I'm going to dump this banana into the mixture, and then I'm going to carefully stir it in. Now that all the ingredients are mixed together, I'm going to pour it into our 64 square inch baking pan. Remember, that's 8 by 8, 8 inches times 8 inches. And it's gonna look pretty gloopy. It'll look kind of like oatmeal. Making sure I get as much of the mixture as possible and I don't waste any of it. All right. And I'm gonna just spread it around, make sure it's nice and even and flat on top. And this is what it will look like, and it's about to go into the oven. It'll be in the oven for about 35 minutes or so. Might need a little bit longer depending on how thick the bars are. But I'll check back in when they're done baking. All right, so here is the finished product. I just took it out of the oven a few minutes ago and let it cool a little bit. But this is the oatmeal bars, or they will become bars. But you can see it's a nice golden brown. You can see the oats on the top. It's smelling delicious. So what I thought we could talk about now is how we should cut up this square, this 64 square inch oatmeal bar block into individual bars. I think I want 8 bars total, which would be eighths. Each piece would be 1/8 of this whole block of bars. But I thought we could do a little bit of talking about equivalent fractions while I cut them apart. So what I'm gonna start by doing is cutting as best I can this whole block into halves. Remember, that's how many equal parts? 2. So I'm gonna cut it this way in half, being really careful because it's still a little bit hot. And now I have 2, if I can get them apart, 2 halves to my block of oatmeal bars. There we go. Oh, you can see the steam coming up. Okay, here's my 2 halves. Now if you can imagine, if I cut up these 2 halves into 2 more halves each, then there would be how many parts total? There would be 4. That would be cutting it into fourths. What I'm gonna do to show these equivalent fractions though is just have you imagine that this part is being cut into fourths, and then I'll actually cut this one to split it one more time to show what this is looking like. I'm cutting this part of it into what would be fourths. And you can see then that here's 2/4 of the oatmeal bar block, and it is the same amount as 1/2. That's telling me that 2/4 is an equivalent fraction to 1/2. But wait a second, Miss Piatt, you said you wanted eighths. You wanted 8 total pieces. Well, I'm so glad you reminded me, Miss Piatt. Now I'm going to take these fourths and split them again, and you can imagine I would be doing the same thing to this half, and I want to see how many eighths are equivalent to this 1/2. So let's see. While I'm cutting these, you should make a prediction in your head. Okay, delicious, delicious. I can imagine that if I had done the same thing to this side, they would look the exact same. So this is telling me that 1, 2, 3, 4 eighths is the same as 1/2, meaning 4 eighths is equivalent to 1/2. What if I do this over here where I cut this part in half? Remember, this size of the oatmeal bar block was fourths, and now I want to see some other equivalent fractions. Looks like these 2 eighths are the same size as this 1/4, and altogether these 4 eighths are the same or equivalent to these 2/4. Well, I'm getting a little impatient now, talking about all these equivalent fractions while I'm cutting into these delicious bars. So what I'm gonna do is just quickly finish up the cutting so that the whole block is cut into eighths, 8 equal parts. And then I'm gonna go enjoy one. A pro tip, you're gonna wanna put a little smear of peanut butter on the top of these to make them even more delicious. It's been so awesome being back on camera to bake with you again, and let me know what you think or if you want to try out this recipe. Thanks, Northwestern, and anybody else who's watching.